Question for you. Do you know what a tariff is? It's been all over the news lately, and I think the best way that I describe it to people is a cover charge at a bar. You're the bar owner, our country in this case, and someone else wants to bring in their own stuff to sell in your bar. You would charge them a cover charge, wouldn't you? Because you have your own stuff to sell, so if you're gonna sell their stuff, you have to charge for it. That's known as a tariff. Is that good? Is it bad? Who does it help? Who does it hurt? Let's talk about it today on our show. Let's go. Welcome back to Mindset. I'm Brad Barrett. This is producer Jared. Today we're talking about tariffs, right?
Tariffs.
So I want to start by obviously saying that I'm not sure this is the most sexiest topic of all things, but it has probably been in the news over the past couple months the most. President Trump, or newly elected here, President Trump, is going to be talking about this like constantly. He was on the campaign trail. So we figured we'd touch on it today. And as you saw in the open, talking about the basics of what is a tariff. Do you know what a tariff is? Like if I were to ask you just in the elevator?
Kinda. I mean, like overall, like taxes on things that are coming to the country, but that's probably the depth of my knowledge on tariffs.
And I would probably say that's probably the depth of anyone who were just asked cold turkey on the street, what's a tariff?
Yeah, it's not exactly a common topic.
Correct.
Brought up in everyday conversation.
Not at all. And look, some people are excited about it. You've seen that on some of the news outlets about what President Trump's been talking about. And so we want to kind of go through it a little bit in that regard. But I will say this, if you clicked on this video and you're watching this, and if you have the answer, even like producer Jared had, about not truly knowing what a tariff is, you're not alone, okay? I think one of the reasons why Trump was talking about it so heavily was largely due to trade. Now, I'm not gonna get into the full economic dissertation, if you will, on tariffs so much, but I want to talk about what our president was talking about and lead into some basics that I think are important for you guys all to know about a tariff and why you should care about it, one way or the other. Interestingly enough, Jared, this is a quote from President, "The most beautiful word in the entire dictionary of words is the word tariff."
Or the word word.
Or the word word. I mean, like, no kidding, right?
It's a lot of words.
I mean, go figure. That's such a Trump statement. I love it. Now, he said this on the campaign trail, and he was saying this largely to hit one aspect of a tariff. He's pledging to bring companies' operations back to the U.S. I want to just pause on that one because that was the lead up to this whole tariffs situation. He's America first, which, by the way, is a great thing. I think a lot of people agree with that.
We love Made in America, always looking for the tag.
Always looking for the tag, Made in America. Great. Now, it comes at a cost. We'll talk about that. And he really doing that to bring everything that we are manufacturing abroad to spur domestic manufacturing. Now, I want to go through a couple things before we start on what President Trump promised here. He promised surcharges of at least 60% on products coming from China, 60.
A lot.
25% tariffs on Mexican and Canadian imports. Basically, a blanket tariff for 10 to 20% on goods from virtually every other country. And then the last bullet point I thought was interesting in our pre-production discussions, he was threatening 100% tariffs against a block of nations, specifically BRICS, which is the Brazil, Russia, India, China environment, right? This whole alliance thing, 100%.
100% seems like the nuclear option for tariffs.
Kind of. That's a little dramatic in my opinion. Again, not trying to be subjective there, but so that's what President Trump was saying. Let's talk about what economists say about tariffs, and then we'll kind of get into some background and why it's important for you to know about this. So the most likely outcome of higher tariffs, let's just talk about that because that is what President Trump is talking about. The most likely outcome of higher tariffs would be price increases for consumers, us, you and I, because as companies manufacture these products or source the parts internationally, companies will pass along the higher costs to the buyers. Now, the secondary aspect of this from an economist perspective is it can fuel inflation. So I'm giving you kind of some of the good, some of the bad to think about, right?
The first thing that comes to my mind whenever I actually hear cost comes down to the consumer.
Yeah.
For someone like me, I'm a headline reader. You see these companies making record profits, things like that, millions, billions.
Yeah.
Yet they're still passing the cost down to the consumer.
Ooh. Yeah. So
why? Well, it doesn't make sense to me.
All right. Look, I'm gonna answer this the best I can in the sense of, look, every ism has a problem. Capitalism has downsides. Socialism has downsides. Communism has downsides. Plus side, and people can argue those kind of things, all right? capitalism being a free market environment, they have that right. So I think we need to start there. Okay. Secondarily, these products that we are buying, it is our right as the consumer to not buy them. Again, hence the word free.
Yeah.
We have the freedom for a company to say, look, it's all right if the product we were manufacturing at $10 went up to $12 and our price at the time was $8 for a $2 margin, we have to bring that to 10 to keep our margin. But I'll go one step further in this question because that's a great question. Look, here's the issue, and this is why economists is so vast, or economics, I should say, is imagine a corporation. Imagine Procter & Gamble, a major corporation, distributes a lot of things that we buy at Target and grocery stores, everything from toothpaste to deodorant to you name it, okay? It's a good example in a way. They have hundreds of thousands of employees. And you think about all the companies that are that large, that are manufacturing products that tariffs would impact, okay? You have to say that, remember, if the company doesn't make their margins, guess who's not getting salary increases relative to cost of living adjustments? Their employees. Guess who's not getting bonuses or raises or anything like that? Then you go one step further. Imagine a public company. Many people are investors. We talk about this investing on our show, right? Investors care about profit. They care about performance. They care about their stock price increasing. If companies are saying, hey, in that same example of we were manufacturing at 10 and selling it at 8, we mean we had a $2 margin. The manufacturing cost went to 10, and maybe we only increased it to 11 instead of 12 to keep the same margin, give or take, right? They're making less money, which means their profits don't show as good, which ultimately bleeds into performance losses, stock prices falling, things, and just a whole host of things.
Gotcha. So really, me as the consumer and me as the investor,
you're kind of one and the same.
You are one and the same, but you're like, okay, do I want my investments to increase? Do I want my consumer prices to drop and save me every day? Yeah. I guess that's the rub with the tariffs.
It is. Now, here's the thing. We're talking about a singular topic today of tariffs per se, and this is it bleeds into so many other fact patterns here. I even touched on inflation. You can talk about everything from M1, M2 money supply in our system, how the Feds controls that, expansionary versus contractionary.
And I don't know what all that is.
I mean, yeah, it gets into a whole host of things. But the point of the matter is, it's a great question and it's true. I'm not here to say whether or not corporations should or should not pass along the prices. I'm saying that they likely will, and we need to know what that means for us.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay. So, what is a definition of a tariff? So Jared and I spent some time to write this down, look through some things, and I'm going to read this almost verbatim because I want it to be clear for everybody. So tariffs are taxes. I got that mixed up. I always do that. Tariffs are taxes or duties imposed by a government on imported or exported goods, and they're designed to regulate international trade by increasing the cost, of foreign products entering a country's market, which ultimately makes domestic products relatively more attractive to consumers.
That's a great definition.
So in its simplest form, that's what's happening. And by the way, this is true of any country. We're sitting here in the beautiful country of America, right? So we're talking about our country here and our president talking about it, but this is also true as a definition of other countries. They're doing the same thing. So it's also, you get into the political and geopolitical environment of negotiations and foreign affairs. This is all where this comes in. Trade is a huge part of how we operate globally, okay?
Are you ready for a nice fun fact about tariffs?
Okay.
Little bar trivia.
Okay.
The tariff of 1789 was the first major piece of legislation passed by the Congress under the U.S. Constitution. Tariffs are as American as apple pie.
That's very true. The way we've operated to defend our country after liberating our country in 1776, right? It's as American as it gets. So whether you like it or not, it's as American as it gets. And it's how we have, right or wrong, kept our superiority for, over 250 years.
Yeah, and I mean, they had that before income tax. That was the main way we funded our government, was tariffs up until they instituted income tax.
That is so true. So not to get down the rabbit hole on that, but that is true. And we'll talk about taxes because the history of taxes is also super important, right? But tariffs were there before taxes were.
Yeah.
Remember that.
Speaking of rabbit hole, so when I read American as apple pie, I started like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
I don't know if you get into those things. I was like, hey, what?
You do, though, and I love that.
I love the origins. Comes from the folktale about Johnny Appleseed.
That makes sense.
Hear about Johnny Appleseed?
Yeah.
And that term actually wasn't widely used until World War II.
Okay.
And journalists would speak to these guys over there fighting, and they would say, why are you here? They would say for mom and apple pie. So that picked up in World War II.
Interesting.
Apple pie synonymous with America.
I always, when you say that, probably a lot of us, we think about that steaming hot pie that a mom would put out on the ledge, on the windowsill. It's like the most American iconic thing.
Absolutely.
It's true. It's totally true. Speaking of history, I think it's probably important at the open of the show, we talked about, is a tariff good or is it bad? So I want to talk about one, probably the most famous one, quite honestly. It's the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. Now here's why it stands out and why I bring it up. It significantly raised tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods, and it was aiming to protect, at the time, American farmers and manufacturers from foreign competition during what?
The Great Depression.
Yes, 1930. Now, why is that important? That's important because imagine we're a country and let's say we could somehow put our country into a trading volume. We said our country's worth $10. And all of a sudden, 1929, 1930 happened, and now all of a sudden our $10 value is now $5. Same country, same everything, just going through a rough patch. You can imagine the piranhas that would come in to try to pick up on something that's valued at 10 but trading at 5. Wouldn't you see that?
Oh, coming in all day for it.
All day. So tariffs can be used, even though they may not work out from a market perspective, which we'll talk about here, they can be used to protect us as well. And I think it's important because I brought this one up because it was really fending off foreign competition, again, during the Great Depression. I think it's important. So let's take a look at the board. The reason why this is interesting is because it basically triggered a global trade war. The reason why I did this is because as other countries essentially retaliated against their own tariffs, what we talk about here is regards to market perspective, but what it did was, and I'm reading this because it was really important, global exports fell by nearly 2/3 between 1929 and 1934, which basically, it worsened the Great Depression. It did so because it stifled economic recovery, basically increased unemployment at that time, and was raising prices for consumers. What I'm going to show you here is a good example of how high tariffs can be a cautionary tale and can backfire, especially in a globally interconnected economy. So, taking a look at this for a second, this is the impact of a Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act on equities. Now, specifically, I want to talk about this as U.S. equities here, okay? So as you can kind of see here, May 28th, 1929, it was passed by the House, passed by the Senate. Now the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act signed into law, right around here. Now you can kind of see what the Dow Jones Industrial S&P 500 was doing over that time. Interestingly to note, the senators, Smoot and Hawley, they lose their seats in the midterm elections right around here. At that time, it started coming back, but never really got back to where it was. Now, this example is a cautionary tale of how high tariffs can stifle trade, especially when we're globally interconnected. And I would argue that we are more globally interconnected today than we were in 1930. Now, why I think this is interesting, because as you can kind of see here, as you look at this, you can kind of see it's a tug of war, right? It's back and forth. It's up, it's down, it's back and forth. And as a tariff, you think about that, that actually is a lot what they are. When there's some good being done by it, there's some bad. For example, in this case, we raised tariffs on imported goods to kind of start to spur manufacturing. And what happened was, the reciprocation is that other countries increased their tariffs and we got in this global trade war. Not too dissimilar to a tug of war. And it's actually an analogy I use a lot when talking about this subject. Now, many of us as kids used to play that, and I think it's a good example of a representation visually of how this looks. Now, fun fact for you, I don't know if you knew this or not, but there is in fact a tug of war indoor championships. Take a look at this. I'm not, again, this always kind of cracks me up a little bit when we talk about this, but if you look at this from a perspective, each side represents a country here, okay? One side is one country, the other side is maybe another country or multiple countries. And the shifting of the balance, as you're seeing here, this line right here is global market share, okay? It's economic leverage. And each country is applying pressure, as you can see, to shift the balance in its favor, either by reducing imports or making its own goods more competitive. That's what you're seeing here visually. Now, the impact of the rope, right, is us. That's the consumers. That's us. We're the ones being tugged on here. Okay, I think it's important because the rope bears the brunt of all this. We just talked about this earlier, right? Producer Jerry had a great question about how this, affects us. We are the rope. That's a lot of tension being placed on us by other countries, right? And we're letting it happen because a lot of times we need these goods and services. But what this really shows is, to me, the best visual representation is the adversarial and back and forth nature that a tariff can go through here. So again, Visual representation, I know it's kind of funny, a little corny, but it's a good viewing of how this would look. Now, I want to talk about some others as well in history because I think it's important. All right, so let's take a look at a couple other tariffs that I think are important. Then we'll wrap this up and walk through, whether they're good or they're bad, and we'll help you answer some of the things. Real quickly, some modern ones, two in particular come out. 2002, George W. Bush raised tariffs on selected steel products in hopes of actually saving the steel industry. Somewhat backfired. And in 2009, President Barack Obama slapped a 35% levy on Chinese tires.
Chinese tires.
I mean,
apparently very popular in the U.S.
Obviously they were, because altogether that increase in prices from the tire tariff, say that five times fast, cost us Americans an extra $1.1 billion.
Obama took that as a win.
He did.
He boasted, like, look at what I did. And then
so did Bush, to be fair. All these presidents are all going to say it's the best thing ever, right?
But when you take a look at it, we lost.
We did. I'm going to bring this to a head here, right? Things I want you to keep in mind are this. Tariffs in general are neither inherently good nor bad. It's, by the way, the same thing I talk about when it comes to money in general. It's not good or bad. It's what we do with it that matters. Tariffs are a tool with which, when used strategically, I think, can remedy trade imbalances. That's a fact that's been proven, okay? I think the biggest thing to take away is that, it's the American companies that pay the tariffs, just to be clear, okay? And those companies end up passing along the tax of those tariffs. By the way, that's the difference between a tariff and a tax. The tariff's actually paid by the corporations that are trying to sell their stuff in other places, or vice versa, okay? The impending tax that comes due on that gets paid to us in the form of higher costs. So,
paid to us or by us?
By us. Not to us, I wish. That'd be nice if it came out wrong.
Yeah, tariffs.
Yeah. So, the best way I can formulate this to end this from a tariffs perspective is a pros and cons list. Because end of the day, me sitting here and saying they're the best thing ever or the worst thing ever isn't really valid, okay? Pros. They can be a valuable tool for international trade and relations. That's true. Another pro is it helps local industries grow, especially in their early stages as a grower, right? By shielding them from overwhelming foreign competition. This does spur small business. So this whole notion of America about small business, this and that, it does help.
All about small business.
Okay.
Keep it local.
Absolutely. So you can imagine if you're a small local person here and you're kind of hooting and hollering it, just remember tariffs actually help you. Okay. Because imagine you're trying to start your business and you got a bunch of foreign competition coming in and just undercutting you. So it does help. Okay. A couple other pros here: reduces unemployment and prevents job losses in sectors that are, again, vulnerable to cheap imports. It encourages domestic investment, that is true, and generate government revenue. Whether or not you want that, it does help.
Government needs money.
Government needs money to help us and those kind of things outside of just our taxes. Otherwise, guess what? Our taxes go up, our actual taxes. Cons: higher prices for consumers. I put that top of the list because we talked about it today a bunch. It is probably the highest con on that list.
And let's be real here. It's what most people are going to deal with every single day. It's what most people are going to be most aware about.
Yeah, higher prices for consumers. It also can cause trade wars, also retaliation wars. So check out what Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, said about Trump's proposed tariffs. Trump got elected on a commitment to make life better and more affordable for Americans, and I think people south of the border are beginning to wake up to the reality that tariffs on everything from Canada would make life a lot more expensive. This is from the time Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Now, to the south of us, President Claudia Sheinbaum said that Mexico could retaliate with tariffs of its own. One tariff, in her quote, one tariff will be followed by another in response. This is a great example of the jockeying.
It doesn't sound like they're like, yay, we're on board.
Well, yeah, why would
they? They're gonna fight us.
Because remember, as the tug of war example, and even from our country, if we impose a cost, remember my example, if we impose a cost to someone else selling their stuff in our bar, okay, then guess what? They might do the same for ours. So that's where the trade imbalances become and how much we need theirs and they need ours, which is a whole other host of matters. Lastly, it can reduce consumer choice. And it can harm export industry. So I guess I'll say this: tariffs can be a useful tool. They always can be. Their negative effects, though, often, and I can go out on a limb and say this, they often outweigh their benefits. Whether or not that's in a vacuum, the total truth is to be seen, and you can make your own decision on that. But they need to be carefully designed. So I guess what I should say is the cons will outweigh the pros if they're not carefully discussed, negotiated, and ultimately put into a strategy. That's what I was trying to say there.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I mean, I didn't really have much of an opinion of tariffs before this.
I'm not sure it would come up in everyday vernacular.
But even in voting or investing or anything like that, I mean, but now it's like you really have to kind of make choices. Do I want the portfolio or my investment to profit, or do I want to save money on my everyday cash flow? I mean, it's really important.
It is, and as much as to be candid with you guys, this wasn't the topic that was the most fun for producer Jared and I, but we felt it right, and we want to do this every week to find things that we know are in the news that are important to put into context and boil down into very simple terms.
It's good information to know.
Good. Well, with that said, next week we are talking about debt strategies, correct? Particularly, we're talking about top tips.
Top tips to get out of debt.
Even better.
It's key. I think for you and I, we just need to start practicing for a professional tug of war. It's probably a good purse.
I feel like we could probably win that.
I think so.
But hey, thank you guys all for watching us today. As always, make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time next week. And always remember to lead with love, and everything will be okay. Let's go, baby.
Oh, it's not loaded.
There we go. I got it. Oh my gosh, it's stuck. We'll figure it out next time. See you guys next time.